There's lots of conflicts in the sex worker rights movement. It doesn't
Hmm.
get talked about. There's a lot of harm that gets done, and like maybe rightfully so, we don't talk about it because it would just look like a bunch of whores fighting, right?
No doubt.
Like meanwhile, that conflict is based in so much minutiae and so much
Mhm.
trauma responses. People are often just trying to feel safe, and that's
Welcome to the Fearless Living Podcast. Welcome to the Fearless Living Podcast. Today, my guest is Jelena Vermilion. She is the founder and executive director of SWAP Hamilton, which stands for Sex Workers Action Program. She is an award-winning sex worker and advocate of over a decade. Jelena has been featured in several national media outlets advocating for the decriminalization of the sale/trade of sexual services and the repeal of PCEPA, or Bill C-36. She provides professional best practices, workshop trainings, and public speaking engagements for organizations and agencies who wish to affirm the rights and dignity of sex workers. She also advocates more broadly for marginalized women, intersex, and non-binary folks, particularly those living with or at risk of contracting HIV. She is a consultant with Trans Pulse Canada and has helped co-author academic articles and research reports for community members and policymakers, as well as guest lecturing at multiple universities. We've been following each other on socials for years, and we finally met in 2022 at the Answers Assembly conference in Edmonton, where Jelena, out of everyone, made me feel safe and welcomed in an environment where I had a lot of anxiety because I was coming out of the whole trauma of COVID and I didn't really trust anyone at the time. But you invited me to sit with you and included me at every opportunity, and it really meant a lot. So I am so super excited to have you here. And before we get into just chatting, we didn't really even have a plan. We're gonna just rock and roll. Can you just tell my guests a little bit about yourself in your own words?
Yeah, for sure. And just before I do, I just wanted to say I love that you brought that up about the Answers conference because I remember you tweeted about that and it was really, really nice. And I was also anxious and I just tried to, you know, treat someone how, well, treat you, but treat anyone how I would hope that, we could be held during an anxious moment. So, um, I am Jelena Vermilion, she, her. I am 31. um, yeah, I am a sex work advocate. I'm a sex worker of over a decade. Um, I run Swap Hamilton, which is a nonprofit grassroots org that we do outreach, education, and advocacy. Um, I just about myself, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe mention the digital archive. I don't think I had that in the introduction.
Okay. Oh, I guess I forgot. Yeah. So I run an archive. I guess I could talk about the inception of Swap and how that bled into COVID and bled into the archive. So Swap started at the end of December of 2018. It
Wow.
was started by a community group. It was an offshoot of a community group called the Gibson and Lansdale Association. And in that group of people, including myself, it was basically this abstract idea of wanting to make a community group that supported and worked with sex workers, to better ends. Long story short, there was conflict in the original group. Some of the people were former owners of escort agencies, so management, and some were current either street based or indoor based sex workers, and we had a conflict and we basically kicked the bootlickers out and because they kind of wanted to their idea of an org was to charge street-based sex workers to basically have a nonprofit hotel to get them off the street in their terms, but the eyesore in their terms, um but also to make money off them. I'm like, so you want to gentrify them and you want to exploit them for like nonprofit dollars. Great. No. Bye. So uh and we're very
Always thinking of the bottom line.
like go back to Toronto, you know what I mean? Like geez. Um anyways, so we it was kind of, kind of in Swap Hamilton's reputation, it came from that scrappy kind of, or like origination. And so that's how it started. And it's been, a good 6-ish years now. In COVID, only a couple of years later, we had our, just before COVID, literally February 13th, I think it was, of 2020, we had our first Swap Hamilton fundraiser event at the former This Ain't Hollywood um, location, which was beloved in Hamilton. We made a couple grand, had a bunch of performers. It was great. Then the lockdown happened, and
Mm,
obviously everybody, became traumatized from the isolation and
mhm,
not seeing people's facial expressions, and just sort of we adapted, and it caused dysfunction, and a lot of relationships went to the wayside that were already dying, and a lot of ones that maybe wouldn't have gone to the wayside did as well, which was
mhm,
unfortunate for many people. And there's a lot of suffering, a lot of deaths, a lot of um, repression, a lot of perhaps misuse of the law in certain circumstances. And I think that, yeah, it was a very terrible time. And so I had been lent a book, or a couple of books, I think it was two or three, by Amy Leibovich and Valerie Scott, who, as we know, are two of the three plaintiffs with Terry Jane Bedford of the Bedford v. Canada case that decriminalized sex work in 2014. And it was, the particular book was Ladies of the Night by Susan Hall. And I remember it was like, I think it was one of Valerie's books, and it had like this awesome embossing from the Library of Valerie Scott on one of the internal pages. It was just like, and I remember being like, I've never seen this book before. It's so cool. And like just Googling about it, and like I found out about WorldCat, which is like it's a catalog of like all books or publications, so you can see like what kind of formats any release has been, given, like if it's been in digital or physical, in multiple formats, a second edition, et cetera, et cetera. And I noticed that, it had never been released in digital format, the book I had in my hand. And so I was like, oh,
mm,
okay, well, I want, it just gave me the idea because like I grew up on LimeWire. I'm 1993, so I grew up on the internet, but I also like was a child of the internet because I didn't really have friends until high school. And so,
oh, interesting.
yeah,
But you
like,
like you're 20 years younger than me almost, and like the same age as my children. My
oh,
oldest
cool.
daughter is 24. But they grew up and you grew up with the shit that I did not grow up with. And it's a real learning curve for me. But like you have such a gift to have grown up with this stuff because then it gives you these incredible ideas that are very progressive, like a digital archive. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
No, oh, don't apologize. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just like it's a different paradigm, right? So
Mhm.
you wouldn't necessarily, it's like not knowing how to think in another language, right? Like it's,
Yes.
yeah. So Um, suffice to say, like I was good at pirating, and I knew how to like use different softwares to, get certain things done on the computer, whether that be removing decryption or decrypting a PDF to get the digital rights management removed so that it can be edited or um, distributed freely without needing a password or something like this, or converting of one file to another, or seeing a video on the internet and wanting a copy of that file saved to my hard drive, or even just getting a copy of a PDF that exists but is behind a paywall. There's
Mhm.
like lots of individual skills that comprise like
So
what
you're a hacker.
Like in a way, yeah, but like I don't know how to program or anything like that. I just mean like
Mhm.
practical skills on the internet. But
Yeah.
a lot of it just comes down to reading and like I know I'll get back to the archive in a second, but I grew up reading. Like reading in the internet were what I grew up on. I read tons of books. I was hyper literate. So I
Me
think
too.
right? So like it was just like being on the computer and getting good at it just came from reading, but I never
Hmm.
got into coding. So started to scan books that were rare, out of print, never been digitized before. And I was just like, okay, I'll keep myself occupied during lockdown by scanning books and, learning about new things and media and not just learning about the books, but like it started with books, but then it grew into, like zines and magazines and films, documentaries, feature length and shorts, et cetera, et cetera. And then I started to archive a few websites like Tits and Sass, you know, um, yeah, I just kind of like using my own knowledge of our histories through learning through archiving itself, but also through my, pre-existing knowledge before I started the archive through my lived experience as a full service sex worker and also as like a literate person. Um, like I already had the curatorial skills essentially
Hmm.
to guide and direct the project, and the project was self-informing. So the more I curated, the more I learned about our history, and the more it all informed like a larger constellation of like my prophetic view and like towards my goals, our towards our goals,
Hmm.
and at least towards my advocacy goals. Um, and so it it grew as like a siloed thing that I just had, and then at a certain point, I had reached out to the Hamilton Library, the public library, and I think it was Lisa Weaver and Paul Takala. Lisa was a head admin, and Paul, I think, is still the CEO. Um, and I just like pitched to them. I'm like, look, this is what I would like to do. I'd like to host the archive at the library. They were really supportive.
That's so
Eventually that
cool.
yeah, 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 right. Eventually, like we had to talk about logistics and like control digital lending framework and stuff like that, which is the framework that libraries use to like when you get an ebook from a library, they take the physical copy out of circulation at the same time, to comply with copyright law. And so the same thing is like they would do the same thing on anything that's uploaded to an archive that's accessed. And they would also remove the physical copy. But in order for that to be possible, you have to own a physical copy. It's like saying here's my DVD. I own the DVD, proof of purchase, right? Like it's in my hand. Um, so when the library has a copy of the book, they can offer it digitally as well. Sometimes, basically, is what that means. And so we created a memorandum of understanding together, which was unique because it's the only one of their archives that actually keeps the property in like it's my property. Most archive collections are donated to the library, whereas this archive like is physically hosted at the library, but it's not their property; it's a loan,
Mm.
and to them, if to the library, if you will, and they're getting like it's been a long time, 4 years now. So the library workers that they've assigned to it like have slowly been cataloging them. And I have like one big giant plastic tote of more books I've bought, including yours, to add to it. So I have to get more bankers boxes from them. But it's like surpassing 20 bankers boxes now, filled with books and
So you have to give them the the actual copy
yeah.
and a digital copy? Is that how it works? Or does it
Um,
get scanned?
the digital copy makes it easier for them. They don't get scanned. The I still went through the process of scanning like hundreds of books. At this point, I do anything I can to just get a pre-existing copy of the
Yeah,
digital.
because I could send you a digital of everything I have.
Oh, please. Yeah, 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 for
Yeah.
sure.
So,
Um,
so what happens with my books, for instance? Let's just follow the
sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you have
So,
my book, How Sex Work Shaped My Life, and you're going to
and the
submit
business
it
Bible.
to and the Business Bible, and you
Mhm.
submit those to the Hamilton Library. Is that how that
Yeah.
works?
So basically, I go to the third, yeah, I bring the books, or like typically I'll collect, like I'll make purchases and they'll collect, and then I'll take that collection and bring them to the library in lump sums. Um, I go to the third level of the central branch on York Boulevard of the Hamilton Public Library. I just ask to get my collection. If I need an extra banker's box, I just ask the archivist or the worker there. And then I just make sure that I put a sign on it to be processed. And then, like, I don't know when it gets processed. I know by whom it gets processed because I know the employee who does it. Her name is Grace. But like I think she's on leave until the end of November, which I guess is very short. We're almost in December, so we'll see if they have time to meet with me this coming month. But yeah, they would catalog it, and um I still have to get the Excel sheet from them with all of the books. But yeah,
And then it's available for people to just take out. Is that how it works?
so they have to actually go to the archive section, which is on the third floor of the library, to speak to someone. Um, they have to get permission. So it is gate
Okay.
kept, but not in a bad way. Like the only reason it's gate kept is because, if let's say a researcher um who doesn't necessarily have our best interests in mind as sex workers, or isn't like well positioned, or you know best suited to produce data that's going to further our liberation,
Hmm.
then buy your own fucking books, because I'm a
Yeah.
poor trans woman on disability, and I shouldn't have said that. It's fine, you can keep it in. I mean, it's it's talked about in my bios and stuff that's public that I live with disability, so it's kind of intimated. But anyways,
I'm on disability too, dude.
okay, cool, lovely.
Well,
Like, it sucks. I also have the
you
tax.
can't support yourself on it, that's for sure, not in Canada.
Oh, absolutely not. And I mean, that's a whole other injustice. Like,
Hmm.
when I moved to city housing, oh my God, my check got slashed. And I was like,
Mm.
I'm paying electricity now. Are you fucking kidding me? And I'm like, it's gone to arrears once already, because I, that's a whole, I'm sure you feel the
Yeah,
same.
I've actually just recently, I think it was this week, yeah. I have uh, Sophie from Answers. She
Of
and I
course,
talked a lot about disability on a podcast, and I think there are so many people with disabilities who work in the sex industry. But
100%.
getting back to your digital archive, I was just thinking because I know years ago, maybe a couple years ago, I sent you a video of me and my ex-partner
It's in
talking.
there.
Yeah, so and I was just thinking, oh my God, so anyone can get that. So when you told me
No,
that it was gate kept, that was a kind of a relief for me.
no, not anybody can get. So there's two versions, right? So the version that would be in the library, there is supposed to be like a 2 terabyte like solid state hard drive in the boxes. To be frank, I haven't found it. The last time I've went through and relabeled all of the books with the Swap Hamilton and Jelena Vermilion stickers,
Hmm.
but or seals, whatever. That doesn't mean it's not still there. It might be in the back somewhere. I don't know. I've yet to hear back from the library from about my email to them about that. But your question, no, it's so there's two versions. So there's the version that's on like the Mega Drive that I host online. It's 1.01 terabytes large right now, so about 1,001 gigabytes. And then
Wow.
yeah, exactly. And then the physical is the 20-ish bankers boxes. When I bring this next lump sum of books, it'll probably be like 22, 23 bankers boxes. Um, yeah, so it can't be accessed by everyone. They'd have to have the link. They'd have to have specifically the parent URL link, which allows someone to access all folders. I sometimes only give out it, like if I'm like, I want, if this person's asking for a specific thing, or if a person is interested in a series, I might only give them a link to that folder, that subfolder of that
Hmm.
series, of that individual thing. Or
Would
I might
someone
just
be able to take that video and use it and replicate it or share it online or use it in like a documentary or anything like that?
like the archive is not for commercial use.
Okay.
No, there's no, and if they did that, like, I'm happy to join you in suing them. Like, it's no,
I'm
like
just curious. Like these are the questions that come to my mind when I think of a digital archive, especially with the sensitive nature
no,
of
I've
our
never
industry.
charged. No, and I never would. Like, it's not, the whole point of the archive is to make the knowledge accessible because my first thought was like, Swap Hamilton works mostly with street-based sex workers because there's a larger amount of street-based sex workers in Hamilton. So, how many of them have phones or access to internet or
Mhm.
computer, like PCs? Like, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of them don't. Most of them don't. um, and if we can make more accessible, like even knowledge, then I want to do that for my community
No
because
doubt.
a lot of the archive was actually funded by my winning against the police, the settlement. So I won. Oh shit. It was settled. I guess I can't leave. I can't have this on the recording, but that's fine. It was settled. All matters are settled. Um, but I can say that a lot of the settlement went towards that. So,
Mhm.
I didn't, yeah, and also the paintings. Here. Ah, oh, hold on. I accidentally blinded myself. So the paintings that were in the Swap Hamilton space,
Oh,
those
wow.
those were all funded by the lawsuit as well. I mean the settlement. I mean it's been settled. But anyway, it's all good. If they want to sue me, they'll look so bad. Honestly, I dare them. It's all good. So yeah, it was about a redistribution of funds, but also making accessible and open our knowledge and histories, but not for commercial use. No, that I think actually it's interesting you bring that up because I think at the beginning that my archive started to gain like not publicity, but like word of mouth publicity in
Hmm.
this, not like online publicity. Although it was right before I got the archives, like it became like a funds collection in the archives. Um, I've had two academics ask me to remove their books from the archive. One of them
Really?
has asked twice, and I've said no to both all of them each time because I purchased their fucking books. I own their books. In fact, I bought hard copies of their books, the more expensive versions. So
Hmm.
here's my argument, and here is a pivotal argument from the jurisprudence or case law, in like I forget whatever the early 2000s digital millennium rights blah blah blah, DMCA, sorry, Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Um, if I buy a DVD and I invite you, Annie, over to my apartment, and I put that DVD and we watched it together, but I'm not gonna fucking charge you. We're just watching a DVD together, right? But I
Hmm.
purchased that DVD. Do you think that the like MGM or whatever films has the right to sue you for the cost of that DVD? Right, correct. That is the correct answer. Of course they don't
Hmm.
because it's called peer-to-peer sharing. I purchased it legitimately and I'm
Mm.
sharing it with you for no commercial reason, right? And it's so that's not a violation of copyright. I'm sharing it with my neighbor. And the same thing was like the basis of LimeWire and like Napster. Like a lot of people purchased the albums and then shared them online.
Hmm.
So the same kind of thing exists when I am the person who scanned a copy of a book because technically it goes from it being a document to it being a photograph of a book, right? Which,
Hmm.
if you want to go into photograph law, like copyright law, like blah blah blah, yeah, technically
So what
copyright law.
are their reasons for not wanting the books in there? Because they don't want them distributed for free? Is that why?
That's essentially it. And it's like, first of all, I won't name them, but the two people that did ask are both tenured academics, or maybe they're not tenured, but they are. One is, oh, I shouldn't say the university. One of them is at a very prestigious university. One is in a big Canadian university. So we'll say that. And I imagine the reason is that, but let's be real. No one's get becoming a millionaire off of their sex work memoir. Like I don't mean to be rude to you. Even
No,
if
not at all.
I don't, it's not like a slight to anyone. It's like I want those truths to be expressed, and it just, just like dissent, it gives, a lot of room for the color of life and to learn and stuff. And I think that's beautiful. Um, but we need to temper our expectations. And if you look at the like about what commercial success any individual can have, like we're like
Mhm.
the Xaviera whatever has sold 1 million copies because it was published in 1979, like, or
Mhm.
whenever the year it was, like, and it was also one of the first of its kind. There's been hundreds of sex work memoirs now, which is
I know.
beautiful,
I have a huge collection of my own.
right? Which is beautiful, and I
Mhm.
encourage that. But if we're going to get into the conversation of an author arguing with another sex worker who has purchased their book legitimately and stating to them that you're costing me profits, I think we need to think critically about it. And I think that,
Yeah.
it's not also based in case law. I think it's out of Mexico. Um, a download is not a lost sale. So when someone, and like I'll speak to this myself. Like when I grew up, I would pirate a lot of music, but if I really liked the band that I was listening to, I would end up buying the digital version, the CD and the vinyl.
Hmm.
um and
Exactly.
so the case law in Mexico, I think it's Mexico, was basically saying that, like, if someone downloads it, it's actually, which is as cringy as it sounds, it's exposure, and the person is
Hmm.
actually more likely to tell someone or purchase it or purchase something related to it than if they didn't have, like, access to it or an exposure. We can't say the same of porn. This is not a comparable argument there, but at
Hmm.
least at least not for unethical people.
I mean, yeah, exactly. The ethicality of that gets in the way because it's, yeah, the nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. And I think 50 Cent said something similar in his book. What's his book called again? Hustle Harder or Hustle Smarter, Not Harder or something like that. And he actually funded getting his like created exposure when a record label turned him down at the last minute and his album was supposed to come out. He used that to his advantage and he released it as what are they called?
Bootleg.
What's it called? I forget the word, but basically when it's released on the street and these guys are selling, like back then it was
Bootleg.
cassettes. So yeah, so he released it like totally on the black market, but as if it and made it look like it was actually being released by a label and and then used it like pretended like all these people were getting bootlegged. Yeah, exactly. Bootlegged copies instead of that was actually his way of getting exposure for the actual album.
Oh,
And
that's smart.
yeah, and it worked for him. Like it was what really shot him to the top was that extremely interesting strategic way of getting his music out, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting book. He's not someone that like I admire as a person, really.
Sure. Yeah.
But when I read about a lot of the strategies he's used to get where he is, it's fascinating, and a lot of it is very helpful. Like he talks about body language,
Yep.
interacting with people, not showing weakness and all that kind of stuff, which I think is so important. But yeah, but I'm getting off topic.
Neurolinguistic programming,
Yeah, exactly. That kind of stuff. Like he's
persuasion and influence. Sounds like you and I would get along. Although I'm not
yeah.
always good at implementing it. Let's be real. I hate Dear Man. Dear Man is hard to do. I hate it. If we're DBT therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. Um, so
I also
yeah,
really liked that that you acknowledged the division that happened during COVID when you first started talking about opening up Swap Hamilton. It's something I feel like we're people mostly still aren't talking about. it's still so fresh and still so painful that a lot of people just aren't comfortable to even talk about it or acknowledge it. I actually had a sex worker friend that I was really, really close to, who during all of that, we had opposing opinions, and I felt like some of her Facebook posts were attacking me. I took her shit personally, like literally took it personally. And I called her out a little bit on her Facebook and then didn't like her response and unfriended her. And that was kind of near the beginning of the whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
4 years went by, was like maybe about 6 or maybe even 8 or 9 months ago. And I, ever since COVID ended, and even right when I did it, I regretted it. But all through COVID and for the couple years after, I often thought about reaching out to her and apologizing and saying, I like COVID made me crazy. It made us all crazy. And I'm sorry that I ended our friendship over it. And
That's
I
great.
finally did that like 9 months ago. I sent her an email and said, I just want to say that I'm sorry because I shouldn't have taken your posts personally, which is the first mistake. And the second mistake was to allow it to destroy our friendship because we were really good friends. And she moved since then, so she's not near me anymore. We used to hang out all the time, but our friendship, she ended up responding. I even said I don't blame you if you don't respond, but I just want you to know how much I cherished our friendship, and if you would ever want to be friends again, then I would really love that. And she responded, and she also apologized for her behavior and said, similarly that she felt that she was behaving, both of us were behaving not characteristically of
Trauma
ourselves.
response.
Yeah, trauma response. And we both had regrets about not just the behavior with each other, but just in general with others. Uh and we've rekindled that friendship, and I'm just so grateful that I had the courage. But it took me about like 2 years because COVID ended, and that's when I started to really like all the friendships that had been tense. You know how you said some were tense? And I was like,
Yeah.
God, that resonates because there's some people who I was super close to before COVID, felt like they hated me during COVID, but we didn't say anything bad to each other, but there was that. And then after COVID, we got close again. And I was just so grateful that I didn't destroy those friendships and that we were able to get over it. And so then that was on my mind, and I really wanted to apologize to that particular another sex worker. And when she responded that she wanted to still be friends, it just meant the world to me. And I'm so glad that we got through that. But I feel like it's just something that a lot of us don't acknowledge. And I think there's a lot of apologies that haven't been said yet. And I really hope they do get said.
What a lovely thing to say.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know what's happened. Yeah, I guess we don't. There's lots of conflicts in the sex worker rights movement. It doesn't get talked about. There's a lot of harm that gets done, and like maybe rightfully so, we don't talk about it because it would just look like a bunch of whores fighting, right?
No doubt.
Like meanwhile, that like conflict is based in so much minutiae and like so much
Mhm.
trauma responses. People are often just trying to feel safe, you know, and that's people reject people, people abandon people, people say the wrong thing, the hurtful thing when they're just trying to feel safe. They're trying to discharge this ennui, the bad feeling in the head, the distress in the body, like the
Mhm.
anxiety. Like they're just everyone we're just trying to be okay, and it's such a hard time to feel okay right now. And
Totally.
especially it was terrible during COVID for sure, but also right now, like it's a
Mhm.
hard time, you
I do
know?
feel like a lot of the mental stress that we all went through during COVID hasn't worn off
I
completely for
agree. I think it's
for the
continuing.
majority of us.
I agree.
Hmm.
It sucks.
So what's Swap Hamilton up to these days?
Well, we are still a part of the lawsuit the Canadian Alliance won, which the Klubikov case just superseded ours, so I'm not really sure where that will go. I think it's slated to be heard on the Ontario at the Ontario Court of Appeal still, and then we had sorry, not had. Recently, we were consulting with the Office of Community Engagement. We did a literature review of research in Canada over the last 10 years after PCEPA was implemented, about the effects of social exclusion or stigma, experiences with police, and experiences with accessing healthcare. So we're trying to use, I mean, we're getting an infographic made of it. So we're trying to like use it towards like giving out more trainings and stuff. Been focusing on rightsnotrescue.ca, which is kind of like our we sell like apparel and stuff for fundraising for
Very cool.
SWAP. Yeah, you know what it is.
I need to get
Um,
on there. I need to post it and say for ask all my clients to send me something for Christmas from there.
yes, please. I think what else?
You know, if I can interrupt you, I there's
Absolutely.
something I've always wanted to ask you, because I one of the things I really admire about you is how articulate and eloquent you are when you speak to a gathering, a large gathering, because I've watched luckily some of those things speeches have been recorded and I've been able to watch them. And I just wonder how do you get the courage? You know,
To be
Susan Davis is like you that way. She has the courage too. And I just wonder, how do you guys have the courage? Because I think I would be shaking. My voice would be shaking. My hands would be shaking. Everything would be shaking if I was trying to stand up in front of a room full of politicians and
do it
whatnot.
shaking. Do
Hey,
it shaking. I said do it shaking. Do it scared. And
do you
eventually
shake?
I shake less now, but I still get nervous and anxious. Yeah. Because it's like I might cry. It's more than speaking well. It's about our ancestors, you
Hmm,
know? It's about our safety, it's about our dignity, and I believe in dignity.
yes.
And it's just like it is a solemn, reverent duty that I take seriously because of all the people in our industry who have been murdered and our murders that have not been investigated. It's more than a talking point to me. It's more than a
Mhm,
brand. It's more than activism. It's about women, and women are the world. So I take it
mhm.
very seriously.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful. And so does Susan Davis. The two of you are like rock stars when it comes to, and I think everybody has a different gift, you know, like as in
absolutely.
terms of sex worker activism. And that is such a special gift, what you and Susan Davis and Valerie and Terry Jean, you know, the people that have really faced the politicians, the courts, the media, and been well spoken, articulate, known what you're talking about when it comes to the law. I mean, you make us look good, and you also are doing so much for our industry. And I just want to definitely make sure I mention that before I let you go, because uh, I am a huge fan.
You're so
If
sweet,
you
and I
can't
love
tell
you
already.
too, Annie. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing all of that. And I mean, I know we have like 5 minutes or so. Do you want to quickly touch back on meeting at the Answers conference and like I remember you tweeted about meeting me and like
sure.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I know that you have conversations with others about like trans people and like, certain situations that, are legitimate and, you know, I think perhaps we both had like wonderings about whether like how meeting the other would go, right? Like whether it would be like whether there would be conflict or not. But like, you know, I I don't think you're hateful at all and I like
Thank you.
yeah, like, I could feel that you don't want to say you needed to be held, but I could feel that you needed tenderness and so did I,
Aw,
like
thank you.
yeah.
And I hope that you never thought I was hateful towards trans or anything.
No, 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 no. I just like, sometimes you see Facebook comments and like you have like
Hmm.
your own perspective and you want to reply, but it's like not my circus, not my monkeys in a certain way.
Hmm.
Like, Yeah. Not like if it's if you want to talk about it after this privately, absolutely. But it's nothing. It's not actually about you. It's actually about someone else that you commented on. That I was. It made me think about like like in the way that sex work, for example, a lot of research, like there are some researchers that like are trying to create false data to like work against us. I worry about like the kind of talking points that get spread around trans people, or like whether the stories shared are actually based in fact or data, or like,
Mm.
because of course there must be people in the world who transition and like regret it, but like
Hmm.
I think the majority of um you know the data and like the stories, yeah, it was just about that basically. So like
I think I
it
know what you're talking about now. Because I do, but for me, it's not about trans so much. It's about
state
surgery.
intervenience.
It's about surgery. It's
Yeah,
about surgery and
yeah.
pharmaceuticals. And
I
so
wouldn't.
my opinion on that, and I'm totally happy to say it, it has nothing to do with trans because I am 100% an ally. And I mean, trans have been around forever. It's not like this is a new thing. I hate how society is acting like this is suddenly new, and the kind
Yeah,
of rhetoric that's being peddled. I really, really don't like that. But I do have a thing about surgery and pharmaceuticals because of
we
my
don't
own
do it.
medical past. And so I just feel that people
Yeah,
should be
true.
adults before they do that. That's it. And that's coming from my position as a mother and as someone who's been really harmed by surgeries and pharmaceuticals, you know?
The surgery, like as a nursing student, like the surgery, I agree because I don't think like it doesn't usually happen before 18. Like there should,
Mhm.
unless there's like a medical requirement not related to gender that like require like a gallbladder, I don't know, whatever. Like, surgery is not the first route for any intervention, right?
Mhm.
The puberty blockers are typically, I don't know if we don't really have time to talk about this, but puberty
We have a
blockers
few
are,
minutes.
yeah, okay. The puberty blockers are usually spironolactone, which is actually a heart medication. It was originally used as a heart medication. It's a potassium sparing diuretic before it was discovered to have anti-androgenic properties, right? Anti-testosterone
Okay.
properties. So um, they are safe, but the thing is, like, I understand parents' reticence about pausing puberty. It's just that like the real distress from the child, especially if it's like if you're thinking about like a female to male, where breasts are developing and like maybe they want to kill themselves because their breasts are developing and they're
Hmm.
still developing until they're 18, right? Um, the argument that a trans person might make is that like, well, I would feel less suicidal if there was intervention a little bit earlier before the physical changes were permanent from the puberty that doesn't align with my gender. And so that's where and some parents don't want
Hmm.
that and some parents are okay with it. So like obviously that's where I agree with
Oh.
you. State intervention and, medical
Hmm.
malpractice, like
And also, I don't believe in
just fall
medical
back.
kidnapping, which was happening
Medical kidnapping?
medical kidnapping. I don't know if this has happened with trans kids, but I know it does happen sometimes when parents oppose a medical decision that a child has made because the parental rights for medical decisions over our children is being eroded. And so our children can go to school and be pressured by nurses in the school to get vaccinated or to get different interventions that the parent outwardly opposes, or doesn't even know about. And kids have been taken from parents because they refused chemo. They've and wanted to do natural treatments for their children. They've been taken from parents because they refused to vaccinate them. There's so many things that the medical community is imposing on children against parental rights. So that's why I say, like, for me, I know there's a lot of gray areas with everything, and especially this issue. Like, I know that for kids who want to transition and know that they want to, it sounds like it would be better to do before their puberty, because it can make it
I
easier
don't
for
want to grow a
for
beard
them.
and then go
Yeah,
back and do laser. I'd rather prevent the
yeah,
beard. You know what I mean? Like, not that I have a beard.
exactly,
You know what I
exactly. So
mean?
I can empathize with that position. Um, and it
Also
is a gray area for
fiduciarily.
sure for me in my mind, but
Yeah.
for me, the problem is when these children can make these decisions on their own without parental influence, and when teachers and or medical professionals are uh, pressuring and or coercing our children to do things that they may not actually want to do. And I feel like kids, especially because I remember, and I've raised three, are so um, fragile and easily influenced in those certain years, especially like my daughter is 13 right now, and I'm allowed to call her she, her, but she identifies as non-binary. And I honestly think if I had had that language at her age, I probably would have too, because I was always a tomboy. But the like this is all stuff that I'm fully supportive of. I love that there's more education and people are opening their minds, and that I hope what I'd like to see is that trans people become less discriminated against. But what's happening is they're becoming more discriminated against because of these divisive issues that are not being talked about in respectful ways. They're just clashing on social media and
Yeah.
in the media and in politics, you know.
Yeah.
But
Like,
my thing has always been more about just the medical aspect of it. It's
yeah,
really it's just because I'm
understandable.
terrified of pharmaceuticals and surgeries.
Understandable. Um, well, 2 o'clock, 2:02.
Yeah, we're getting 2 o'clock for you, 11 for me.
Oh, right, it's earlier for you. I'm sorry.
No
Um,
problem at all. Why
well,
don't we wind down?
sure,
Before we go, let's finish on like a really happy note
sure.
here. And let me think, what's a good one? What would be your best advice to give to a sex worker? And then what would be your best advice to give to a client?
Sex worker would be that no is your best friend, and to a client is that stop haggling.
I love it. Those are really quick to the point messages. I adore you. So how can thank you so much for the
No,
respectful discussion, and I hope
yeah,
that nothing I said was
no, not
offensive
at all.
or anything. And I just love
No,
you and I love
I love you too.
talking with you, and I appreciate that we can talk about difficult subjects with
Absolutely.
respect.
Maybe we can do another podcast and make that the center of the topic or
I
whatever.
would
Like
love
I can
to. I
share
would
my
love to because people
experience.
having respectful discussions about this is so rare,
Yeah,
you know.
honestly, that's like when there was the school board thing, like sorry, in Hamilton when there was like the protest at the school board, kind of clashing, but not on social media. I talked like I can't talk to the whole crowd, but I talked to two women and I like, what are your issues? What are the exact issues? I explained to them, okay, I hear you, but what the sign you're holding doesn't align with what your issue is. Your
Hmm.
sign is actually very offensive and homophobic,
Yes.
and it doesn't tell the public or the crowd what your issues are, which I agree with you on those particular issues. And then I shared my experience. We ended up taking a picture together. Like one was a
I know.
Muslim, one was a Sikh woman. They were both women of color. You know, like like I can't talk to the whole crowd. And there were
No,
people trying to actively stop us from talking because they could see it was peaceful.
that's
So
wrong. But yeah,
yeah,
one-on-one is the thing, isn't it? Like I found that during COVID, if I talked to a person one on one, we were kind, loving, and respectful to each other. But if someone online found out that I was unjabbed, I could have like three people block me and four people trash talk me
so
and another
ridiculous.
person verbally attack me personally, all in one day. Like it was so crazy. But then if I would have been able to sit across from each of those people, I bet you it would have been a different situation, you know?
It's kind of like the hospital. Like when you work in the hospital, like you encounter some patients that can't or haven't had a vaccination or any like a particular kind or a series of vaccinations, and it's like, okay, you might be privy to the reason why as a medical professional, but it's like it's still like it's not like it is your business in the sense that if you're a healthcare worker, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's not.
Hmm.
It's neither here nor there.
Hmm.
Like it's just a like so especially it bugs me to know that if you say you're unjabbed, like they don't know the reason for it.
Yeah.
there might be a reason for it. They shouldn't be judging you or persecuting you off of face value information when they don't know the reasoning or the like what came to that decision. So like even if people disagree with the outcome, it does like they're
Hmm.
that doesn't does are disabled people wrong for existing? Like I don't
Yeah.
understand. Like you know what I mean? Like
It's kind of like that, a lot of people, this was going around during COVID. Like, if you aren't vaccinated, you don't deserve health care. And a lot of people were kicked off
bullshit.
of transplant lists or put at the end of medical procedure lists for not being vaccinated. And some people even died because they didn't get the transplant or the medical that they needed.
Wow.
So it was just crazy, but at the same time, another person who's made life choices like, say, drug addiction or anything, everyone gets respect, but not the unjabbed. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how it was at that time. So I really hope that's improving in the hospitals. I know for me, because I've been through some medical in the last year, not a single person asked me, not a single person made me feel bad. Nobody tried to force a mask on me or anything. And I was just like, oh, thank God. This
Well,
would be so much harder to go through during COVID.
it's not the law now. They can't force you, right? They can ask you and you can
Mhm.
decline. That's fine. You know, that's perfectly the law. But yeah, um, I'm glad to have friends like you.
I'm glad to have friends with like you. I'm glad to have you.
Yay. Likewise.
So how can
Well,
people find you?
all right. I'm all over like like in different formats. So my personal Twitter is Isis Intrepid, ISISINTREPID. I also run Swap Hamilton, which is as it sounds, Swap SWAP Hamilton. Um, I run Rights Not Rescue on Twitter. It's rights underscore not underscore RESC, as in the first four letters of rescue. And then you can also check out our wares at rightsnotrescue.ca. And my sex work website is www.isis-intrepid.com. INTREPID.
Awesome. And I will post all of those links underneath in the description as well.
Thank you
I
so
love
much.
you, and we definitely have to do this again. But yeah, we'll pick one topic because I think it's so hard for me and you. We just want to talk about everything.
Woo! Yeah, true. Okay. Well,
All
I
right.
love you. I we have to blow kisses.
Yeah,
Bye. It was lovely, Annie. I hope you have a great day, okay?
you too.
Bye.
I'm Annie Temple, the erotic entrepreneur. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much.